And the All Blacks have come back and restored some pride within their jersey. Massive congrats to them after that big loss against Argentina last week. They've come back and they've shown all of us that they are still a massive threat and that they should be taken seriously in this rugby championship. This was a much improved performance by them and a much worse performance by Argentina. However, I don't think it's fair to say that the reason that the scoreline is so much worse this week for Argentina is because they played badly. I think they looked a lot worse because the All Blacks put them under so much pressure throughout this game. The conditions for this game was absolutely horrendous, with a lot of rain and a very muddy pitch, so it was always going to be different factors that were going to influence this game than last week. Factors like the kicking game and the scrum and the set piece as a whole, this was always going to have a much bigger influence this week than it did last week. One of the big reasons why the All Blacks couldn't get into last week was because there wasn't a lot of scrums. I'm sure all of you have heard of this, but there wasn't a single scrum for 60 minutes during that game. And in this game, there were a total of 18 different scrums. New Zealand dominated the first half and really the game as a whole massively. I thought that Argentina really grew into the game as it went on, however not enough to really cause the All Blacks a lot of problems. A big reason why the All Blacks weren't under so much pressure this week is because they had a lot of dominance in the physical game. By the end of the first half, Argentina only had 36 post-contact meters from 39 carries. That is less than 1 meter per carry. And this really prevented them from generating any meaningful momentum on attack. Part of the reason for this physical dominance as well was the fact that Argentina had a lot of messy ball at the ruck. The All Blacks put a lot of pressure at the ruck and they put a lot of pressure on the scrum half Berchanu. If you look back at that game, you can see that Berchanu struggled a lot to get the ball out cleanly to his pods and to the backline. But the All Blacks didn't just do the basics well in the first half, they were also really clinical on attack. For example, by the end of the first half, Argentina had 56% of the territory, whereas the All Blacks only had 44%. And in terms of possession, the All Blacks had 59% of the possession, whereas Argentina only had 41%. I think this would suggest that the All Blacks still weren't afraid to play. They still wanted to attack a lot. However, this week they were way more clinical. When you look at their carries, the All Blacks had 121 post-contact meters from 56 total carries. That's not really that dominant. And this is what I mean when I said that Argentina didn't play that badly this week. I just think the All Blacks were on fire. Despite not generating a ton of momentum on attack, the All Blacks still managed to create holes, to create opportunities, and to be very deadly, which then subsequently led to that 35 points to 3 halftime score. In the second half, Argentina did manage to claw themselves back. It was basically a 7-7 draw. However, I think it's very important to also realize how good the All Blacks' game management was in the second half. They were under more pressure, but they also managed to control the game a bit more and not to really let Argentina come back into the game massively. A cornerstone for the All Blacks this week was their defense. Their defense was a lot better this week. Like I said, Argentina really struggled to generate any meaningful momentum. And the reason for this was the All Blacks were very aggressive this week. If you look at the last game, the All Blacks did not have a very aggressive defense. They were very passive and they focused on a lot of drift defensive lines. And this really played into Argentina's hands because Argentina had lots more opportunities to put the All Blacks under pressure, particularly on counterattack. And I think this week, because of the conditions and because of the rain and the fact that there were always going to be more mistakes in terms of ball handling, the All Blacks realized that if Argentina did find space, it did not necessarily mean that it was always going to lead to opportunities. So they could take a lot more risks on defense. In total, the All Blacks had to make 161 tackles, which is more than Argentina had to make with 137. However, here's the difference. The All Blacks still managed to have a 92% success rate, while Argentina only had an 82% success rate. Argentina still had a lot of attacking opportunities in this game. However, I think with a combination of this pressure from the All Blacks, their defense being on point, and the conditions, it just wasn't the right strategy and the right approach for Argentina to really still go out there and try to score as many points as possible. And we can see that Argentina still had this mentality of really trying to attack. They made 21 total kicks during this game, which is a fair amount. However, the All Blacks made 35 kicks this game. Another area where I thought the All Blacks really got the upper hand was in the set piece. In games like this, it's always going to be very important for teams to set up solid platforms and to put their opponents under pressure in the set piece. And particularly in this game, there were a total of 48 different set pieces. That is a lot of set pieces, and that is comparable to some of the older games that you used to see in like the 80s and the 90s. Just a massive amount of set pieces. And Argentina were under pressure during most of them, I would say. Another great area for the All Blacks this week was the maul. We don't usually associate the All Blacks historically with a lot of mauling, but in this game, and particularly recently, their mauls have been exceptional. In this game, Argentina was put under massive amounts of pressure at the maul. And this gave the All Blacks a lot of good platforms for really good strike moves, because essentially the defense was already on the back foot when the ball left the maul. The last area where the All Blacks put a massive amount of pressure on Argentina was really these short-range chip kicks just behind the defensive line. Argentina also did a few of these, but I felt that for the All Blacks they were a little bit more accurate and they caused Argentina a little bit more problems. And I think this is really a critical piece to understand. In general, there is this idea that if you kick more during the game, you will in general win more, and that's not really true. The reason is because, like everything else, kicking is a tool, and you have to put yourself in the correct positions first before you can utilize a strong kicking game. And the All Blacks really did that well this week. So despite having a lot of kicks, 35 kicks in total, they still had less of the territory. And this means that their kicking was very active. Their kicking had goals, and they executed on these goals in their kicking game very well. There was a lot of doom and gloom for the All Blacks leading into this game. However, just like all previous times, just like both the previous times that they lost to Argentina, they came back and they absolutely hammered them. In my opinion, this rugby championship is still far from being decided. Of course, those next two games in South Africa are going to be very critical. Those are probably the most important games of this rugby championship. However, if you're an All Blacks fan, I'd still have a lot of hope. And as a South African, as a Springbok fan, I'm still very worried going into those two games. And for Argentina, I think they'd still be pretty satisfied. They would have wanted this game to be a bit more competitive. However, if you consider everything else and the fact that this Argentinian team is really growing into a very competitive outfit, and the fact that they've still got a lot of opportunities to prove themselves further in this rugby championship, it's still an amazing tour for them. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys very soon. Cheers.